Hi, everybody. Welcome to our first Friday, 4 o'clock Pacific Standard Time meetup to help accommodate for our community members in the APAC. So Saturday morning their time. What time would it be that generally? Let me double check. What time was it in APAC right now? You remember or
Oh
no?
yeah, it's so it's on the actually on the notice for the thing.
Yeah,
I still haven't worked out
I
the
just can't
difference.
remember. But like 4 p.m. Mountain View
Yeah.
time, morning time is about, I don't know. We'll figure it out. Let's see.
So yeah, I mean it's basically Saturday morning.
Saturday, right.
Yeah.
But
And
just to help accommodate our community members in the APAC region, if this time doesn't really work for you all, please respond back and we will continue to zero in on a time that works for everybody or the most people possible. But the whole idea is we want to start bringing more and more of our community members into opportunities for us to chat and discuss. So with that in mind, it's just Art and myself today. So hey, Art, good to see you. And what's on your mind, Art, and what would you like to talk about?
I'm still on the topic of that as sort of an extension too. So about 3 or 4 weeks back, I was asking about the posters within notes in the tabular format. In fact, I was just watching that meetup session again, parts of it again this afternoon.
Okay.
And fantastic. But I think sort of related almost to that, we had someone bring up a question of tracking stocks. I think it was Tom Diaz. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. And then sort of started rolling into it a little bit more. And then I think we have one other person who's new to the group who asked also to be part of the sort of the working group on
Yeah,
this
that was Jen.
the stock ticker sort of
Yeah.
environment. So I've shared that file. I made some updates to it. It's not yet a active, nothing's happening in the file. I'm just trying to lay out and set up certain common queries that people who are using maybe spreadsheets or stock tracking apps might also want to glean from their data if once it's in Tinderbox. Um, I guess my logical reasoning is such that if we can use the auto fetch to pull current stock prices, anything is possible. Really, we can get the current stock price of whatever stock it is. We can track it over temporally. We can set up posters so that they will report the your overall performance of your stocks. And then a lot of that is just math,
Mhm.
um, to the extent that like depends on who's got how many different shares and on what exchanges and things like that. It gets more and more complicated, I think, the more complex a person's life is. But I also sort of wanted to make it part of an overall net worth calculator. I think that makes more sense. I don't see much point in just tracking something, for the sake of the stocks. There are programs that do that anyways that make a lot more sense. But if it's something like that, it's a holistic net worth calculator, and then you open it up and it shows you, oh, hey, this is where I stand. I have a mortgage that's worth so much. I have got retirement plan that's coming in X, kicking in X many years. So then it starts becoming a nice dashboard via which you can take a look at your investments, your obligations, your liabilities, maybe your college loan, whatever it is that you want to track with it. And we are sort of using Tinderbox here as I'm not going to call it a spreadsheet because it's not one spreadsheet. It'd be probably like a set of spreadsheets, several spreadsheets that work together to give you a picture of your assets.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about the way you're wording that, and again, you can go as granular or as high level as you want with something like this. So, for example, you could try to, import your monthly investment statement in and have it down to each individual stock you own. Or if you were, once a month, you look at your statements that you get and you just plug in the totals, right? It really just depends on to what level that someone, at what level does someone want to track?
Correct. Yeah.
And why do they want to track? And keeping in mind too much granularity, you'll probably get lazy. Too little granularity, you won't have enough value.
This is a very good point. And actually, that's why I'm considering the using the automated features of Tinderbox for the deeper granularity stuff. So you don't actually have to do that.
Mhm.
If you're using auto fetch and that's entering your information automatically, then it's just a matter of loading up the app and then you see what
True.
you.
But again, that as we've learned from the JSON imports and the other elements, that the ability to auto fetch is, and especially with the, an auto fetching a website is one thing, but doing auto fetching through aka paywall, some kind of username login could actually be a little bit more problematic. And
No, I mean, this is not the case anymore, Michael, because like if you look at Google Sheets, they have a function in Google Sheets that's called Google Finance. It actually goes out and pulls any.
no, I'm sorry. I was thinking though, you could pull any public record stock, sure, but if you were
Yeah,
actually trying to pull from your own, your like your Morgan Stanley account or something,
your
that's what I
Vanguard.
have in
Yeah.
mind. That would create a little bit more complexity. But if you were, and so that's where I think it gets kind of, it's an interesting exercise, but again, it really depends on how one manages their money. Like if you're buying and selling your own stocks, then maybe that's a good thing. But if you got a person doing it for you through say a broker or something like that, and it's all in a bunch of different funds, that manual exercise of syncing what's in your behind the paywall with your broker with it's out there in public, it could get pretty complicated pretty quickly.
So again, very good point. I think probably there are two ways to go about it. One is that if you consider that even if it's a Morgan Stanley or a Vanguard account, ultimately most of them are investing in funds that they are already selling, products that they're already selling. Those products are publicly listed. So
Yeah,
you will know from time to time how many of your dollars your investment manager put into, Vanguard Growth Fund or Vanguard Health Fund or Morgan Stanley Eastern Asia Fund. You'll have that idea. So all you have to do is put in the number of stocks you have on each, and it will pull and get the
sure.
price of those
But
products.
but I think the whole point though is it ultimately comes up to what's your information architecture, right? And what
Yeah.
level of information are you looking to capture, and then how would you expect that information to be updated and maintained?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it would be the same for any two people.
No, I don't either, and that's where it gets kind of complicated quickly.
But anything in Tinderbox really does get that way, doesn't it? I mean, even if I ask a question on the forum and then there is a fleshing out of that experimentation idea, all I can glean from it are literally the pathways that I could take to go down, that next rabbit hole. It's not, nothing is signed, sealed, delivered, pre-formatted, pre-digested in Tinderbox, right? So
Correct.
we
And
can
that
just
and that's both the bane of the community's existence, but also the great aspect and the amazingness of the tool.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And all our opportunities to learn, like if you choose that, if you choose to take it as such, I guess.
Right. Right. Okay. So, I mean, we can explain if you want to, and again, I think one of the issues or the things we could think about on that context too is I also wonder how many of the members of the community see Tinderbox beyond being simply a place where I take notes to a tool that actually can conduct, in some contexts, it's very complex math.
Hmm.
And then an attribute value, and then yeah, and that you can in fact do calculations, and those calculations can show up on a dashboard, and that creates insights for us. Um,
Yeah, I mean, isn't that like the sort of the perennial conundrum with using Tinderbox? Because there are two ways. One is there are just so many ways to do the same things,
mhm.
and each person picks their own way through it. And then second of all, of course, everyone has different requirements. It was an interesting sort of follow-up to that thread, the one that was started by Jen. Let me see if I pull it up. The one that says, "Help, I'm trying to."
Yeah,
Um, and actually, it got so much traction and so many responses, and it is kind of interesting because actually, if you think about it, a lot of this represents the variety of ways in which people are using their tool set um, for knowledge management. And there are some excellent reactions, and there are some very specific responses. And then, at the end of it, I still, we haven't really come up with like, oh, this is the ideal way in which you would use Tinderbox or Curio or numbers for that matter.
Yeah, and again, I think about some of the comments. Like at the end of the day, it really comes down to your attempt to make sense. So sense making is one of the big things that stood out to me from that whole conversation. And at the end of the day, it's about sense making, and it's about making sense of the inputs, and then ultimately, and then what kind of output do we want to create from making that sense, if we want an output at all.
Right.
Right. In the sense, and when I say, and I would actually argue that we'll always want some output, like to the extent that you and I are having a conversation now about information that we've read, and we're now verbally conveying that. For me, that's an output. Whereas often when people think about my use of Tinderbox or related tools, I'm often pushing down that path of export and the report that I'm trying to create. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, for me, being able to verbalize the sense making I made from communicating or ingesting material is an output.
So I mean, there's two things right there. That one is using Tinderbox as a sort of a thinking toolbox or thinking sandbox in which you throw your ideas and thoughts around and you give colors and shapes and sizes and you link and you go, oh, now I've made sense. Now I comprehend what's on my plate. I comprehend this topic or this aspect of our project that I'm working on. And then the second part is deliverables, which means like how do I take that construct of ideas and then selectively send it out to people I want to share that information with, which may not be the same. If you have a corporate results, a Tinderbox project that you've done, you're going to have at least 3 or 4 versions. One version to go out to the senior management, one version for your investors, one version for your teams, one for the website. And so selectively pulling out the result of your thinking is also an interesting issue, which I think Tinderbox, if used correctly or appropriately, can do wonders because then you can have your data in one place.
Well,
And
exactly. And again, this is where, and on that note, for example, and maybe we can demonstrate it in today's call if it would be interesting for people, um, is that that's a really great use of agents, for example.
Mhm.
That selective querying of notes that meet a certain parameter, and then you have those notes show up as an agent. And then again, if you're using export, if you're using templates, you then can render the results of those agents or the results of the notes that those agents discover in any number of different ways. Right. So, for example, for an executive team, you may represent it as a Gantt chart that you've actually pulled from R or Plotly. If it's if it's for your team, you may represent that as a list of deliverables with start dates and end dates. I mean, there's just so many different ways to take the same material and re-visualize it and re-represent it. And I think you made a comment either in the forums or last week's channel is that if you take a step back, Tinderbox inherently has 10 built-in views. And then it has essentially with Plotly, R, viz.js, or your own hand-built HTML templates, you have an infinite number of views.
Very true.
You can do it. You can view your data any way you want.
Yep, and export formats as well. Like so you can
And
spit
export
out
formats as well, and you can get it out in any number of ways you want. And I think that's a really powerful thing to consider. And even today, for example, I was working with so again, as everyone knows, I do 90% of my work in Tinderbox, and I start presenting much of my results and my projects to clients out of Tinderbox. And they often will get overwhelmed and they're like, oh my God, that's a lot of information. It doesn't make sense. But I've now, increasingly figured out ways of like grabbing the information I need and then just being able to paste it into an email, for instance.
Hmm.
And today was really great because I had a bunch of different lists of categorical concepts that I was sharing with a client. And then I was able to simply very quickly open up those notes in a new tab, view that tab in table, add a couple of the pertinent attributes to the table, copy that table as a tab delimited file, paste that into an export into an Excel spreadsheet, and send it to the client. You know,
Great.
and that whole process took maybe 6 minutes.
That's
Yeah,
great. But do
and that
you,
was really, really just amazingly powerful.
I agree. I'm curious about what you're relating from your experience today. Do you get the opportunity to use Tinderbox as a sort of a CRM
Yeah,
in a sense so that
yeah,
you send
absolutely,
this
absolutely.
report, so you can save a copy or you can save the the action code that generated that report, or just save the PDF in a location on a note, like as a file reference. So that way you can go back and track what you've done and whom you've given it to.
Yeah, I do actually. So if you've done it through Mac Mail, I can grab the email URI and then grab that URL, or to your point, save that email as a PDF, and then either using Hook or just the path, paste that into a note to do that.
How, how is Hook working for you, by the way? I'm sorry, I think I'm also like floating.
I go off and on. Sometimes I use it, sometimes I don't. I'm pretty inconsistent, honestly.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, and the other thing too is, going back to your point of Tinderbox as a CRM tool. I just recently taught my Tinderbox 101 course, a 6-week cohort course, and I actually managed all of my announcements for the class course out of
Hey,
Tinderbox,
excellent.
and I was able to email the announcements out of Tinderbox. And as I
Right.
added like some freemium members to the class,
Mm-hmm.
to get them to allow them to catch up, I was able to copy the previous week's announcement, remove
Nice.
people's names, paste in the new person's name, and then send them the email. So I was actually able to keep track of who got the announcements, when did they get the announcements, what was
Yeah.
actually sent to them. Uh,
Super.
yeah, and
And so
so
easy to do, actually, if you think about it, so easy to actually do. Maybe, well, not maybe easy for someone who's beginning, but if you're in the flow, in your flow state, and you go, oh yeah, I'm sending this email to another 20 people. Oh yeah, I need to just add to the attribute or add some action code the moment the email goes out. It just lines, it basically lists, whom I've sent it to.
yeah,
Boom, you got the beginnings of your
yeah.
CRM.
I've actually done that. And what I've also done too, and I can demonstrate this if you're interested, is I have set up some action codes so that I can copy, like if you're in Mac Mail, you just go copy the person's email address. And so, say like Art Currim, and then you get the little carrots and then your email address. And so I created some action code where I can paste that string into an attribute, and then the action code parses out the person's name and their email address, and then creates
Fine. Okay, cool.
their record and populates their record with their email address, when then all that links together and then lets me email. So
Brilliant.
so I've really kind of automated
Yeah.
that parsing and then automatic population of attribute values for the
Got
context.
Gotcha. So how
And
many?
it
I
took me
think
a
this is
while.
turning into an interview of Michael Becker because it's like just asking you questions about how you're doing stuff, but it's actually really interesting. And I'm sure people, may take some things for granted or may have some certain assumptions about how you manage to do 90% of your work in Tinderbox. And, it bears some deconstruction from time to time. Well, what exactly happens? How many projects do you have? How often are you using your key projects? Do they interrelate? Whatever happened to the idea about like a shared tinderbox for your other tinderboxes? To what extent is CSS working for you? There are all these very interesting questions to me, at
Yeah,
least.
CSS is constantly being used. One of the ways I share, one of the kind of insights I generated by sharing files between Tinderbox files is developing a consistency of my nomenclature, getting much better in using functions and putting code into notes. And so now I can copy my code notes, my function notes, my stamp notes in between files. They're all using the same named attributes.
Hmm.
Um, and then because I no longer I very rarely use edicts and rules and notes. I only use them for a specific context now. So that way I don't, when I generate a new attribute in another note, or if I copy a prototype from one Tinderbox file to another, I don't have to worry about the action code, the edicts rules, causing problems in my files, because I automate that through on visit stamps. And so,
So this is a very interesting actual point of reference, because on this need help thread, I think Mark Anderson had made some interesting observations about the usage of automation in Tinderbox, and that applies to the on visit and other sort of automated ways in which you're accustomed to dealing with your notes. And I mean, one of the interesting things is, for me, I have a lot of intentionally redundant edicts and actions in my notes, which basically work just fine, because none of my projects, no two projects are the same. They're not constructed the same. So they're vertical in terms of how they help me do my thinking, but there's no structure. There's no sort of scaffolding that is a vertical scaffolding, because I don't really have any similarities between any two of my projects.
yeah.
I can imagine a case where, if I were to create all that scaffolding, and probably in many cases it would be worth less than the amount of time I was actually delving into that project, getting my work done and getting out. So I think what I'm trying to point out is, like, it could be a spectrum, when
Oh, well,
you're
yeah,
talking
and
type.
that came out of Jennifer's thread again, is that spectrum of, are you doing a bunch of one-off projects, or are you doing projects with similar structure where automation is beneficial and worthwhile? And that was
That's right.
kind of the first spectrum that Mark put out. And then I added to that, though, a couple of other thought points on that. Is one around, sometimes it's worthwhile learning some action code or experimenting with a template or playing with a poster, not necessarily even for like you can try to see if it can solve your immediate problem, but often I'll do it just because I'm inspired to do it, and I trust that while it may not give me immediate value today, I trust that a day, a week, a month, 6 months from now, that effort I invested today to learn something will benefit me down the road. Uh,
Yeah, I think I went through a phase like that too. I think probably is a lot is to do with an individual's sort of ability and inclination to do that kind of learning, because it can be very heavy on the brain. If I
yeah,
go to use an already complicated program and I'm trying to get something done, and then in order to learn how to do that thing, I have to take a couple of paths and learn other things along the way. um, I might look at it differently. You might look at it differently. The third person, someone like Bruce, might look at it differently. How much learning is necessary in order to do the learning that we need to do to get our immediate objectives met
right.
is a bit of an issue with Tinderbox, because it's so complex and you can do so many things.
Right. But again, on that note, I found that, and this is interesting because I found that sometimes I'll do that too, simply because what I'm working on is, sometimes you need to redirect your brain to something else to give it some space to figure out what you're actually trying to figure out.
Yeah, yeah,
And it's easier to come back to it. Other times I do it just because it's fun. I need a break, and I'm just going to play with it because I enjoy it and it's fun. And then if I get the added benefit of actually having learned something and or it being useful for me down the road, then that's a bonus.
yeah.
But that's also a big part of what I do. And then recently I've adopted, and I've struggled my entire life with this, and in the last few weeks or 3 weeks or so, it's gotten really beneficial in that I've started to track my time better. Like, what am I actually spending my time on? And am I spending my time on paying projects or non-paying projects or development initiatives or personal time? And because I've now started really rigorously tracking my time, that's also helped me. That says, okay, I'm going to pop in, maybe I'm going to spend an hour messing around with this thing, even though I have something for a paid project that I need to get done. And then I realize oh yeah, I got to get back to that paid project now, and then I can go in and turn off the fun thing and then go back to the paid project. But the fact that I'm holding myself accountable with my time tracking has been really helping me to keep focused on the fact of what am I doing and why am I doing it, and I'm having to make the conscious choice. And honestly, I've built a time tracking utility in Tinderbox to do that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and if you want, I'll be then maybe that's something for today's exercise. If
We
we
could
want
take.
to reproduce that, we can play around with that idea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, as you're speaking, I'm also getting a thought about, you know, taking control of time. It can be really either preemptive or it can be post or after the fact, with varying degrees in between.
Yep.
So, you know, if you're the King of England, you wake up in the morning and say, "Today I shall ride a horse," and that is your going to be your entire day. You have control of your time, full control. You know,
Yep.
this is just analogy. And then if you're basically someone who's really hardworking, who's got multiple projects on the go, has to report to and or respond to multiple clients, you're not really in control of your time. And you only know the extent to which the deviation from your ideal use of time, you only know the extent of that deviation after the fact at the end of the day. And so then you make resolutions, go like, tomorrow I'm going to spend less time dealing with client X because he hasn't paid for anything for the last 3 years. And I need to spend more time on learning Y language because I need it for this upcoming big project. So it's very interesting basically about time, because even trying to use Tinderbox as a time manager or even like a goals manager for your life, it can be easy or it can be hard depending on the extent to which you can control your time.
Well, and also too, it goes back to the beginning of our conversation today. How much granularity do you want to be tracking versus how much top level do you want to be tracking? And again, I've set up my prototypes, and what I found over the last few weeks is I've set up my prototypes that can capture a certain level of granularity. Uh, and I've automatically set it up so I get the minimalist level of granularity that I need. And then if I want to go back at some point and maybe refactor it and add a little bit more granularity, I can, but at least at the very beginning, I'm automatically getting the base level granularity I need.
But
Um,
also you're fast at what you do. And
but
so for you to achieve and also to estimate how many steps you're going to need to achieve that level of ideal granularity for that particular segment of your project is much easier, because you can just you can eyeball it and get an idea. It's going to take me half an hour, or oh crap, I'm going to have to go out and ask Chat GPT for a whole list of, you know, header instructions in order to just get this one table done. So okay, it's not worth my time this morning. Maybe I'll
yeah,
do it.
yeah,
So
I'm actually playing with one of those right now. I've got this really complex table I'm trying to build, and that's kind of the combination between learning something new, it's fun, and it's a perfect example. Like I spent like an hour on it today, and then I finally shut it down because I actually had to get the real work done.
mhm.
And eventually I'll probably take me another 3 or 4 sessions like that until I actually get the table built. And
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, as a creative person, like a lot of the stuff I do is just a lot of meandering and playing and really purposely, intentionally having
intentional
more time.
play. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, basically, and that's because most of us go through life and then we get this level of guilt or this sort of like this the little clock, the alarm clock in the back of our mind. Oh, I've taken already too long. The dog needs to be taken out. I've got to send this report in. I haven't checked my emails all morning. What about my credit card bill? And so that sort of pulls us away from that flow state.
right,
Um,
right.
um,
So and again, that's another reason why I like Tinderbox too, is because my flow state, my work state, it's all kind of generally in one place. In one and across 2 or 3, 4 files, Tinderbox files. And
I agree. Look, I'm totally on board with you. I'm just thinking to myself, though, you have to be like Indiana Jones. You actually have to pass the crevice and the room full of skeletons and go through the viper den, and then you get to a point where now you can actually operate holistically inside Tinderbox and get 90% of your work done.
yeah. And
But
there's a lesson that from behavioral.org that I learned a while back. He's I don't know what he does, some kind of consultant guy. And he's got this great visual that I often leverage. And it's this line, straight line that then gets all squigglied up, and on the other end of the squiggly lines is another line. And he basically says, we start with simple, and we what we want is elegant simplicity. But in order to achieve elegant simplicity, you have to navigate your way through complexity. And
Yeah.
that's what I so love Tinderbox for, is it is this great, incredible medium environment because of all of its views and all of its capabilities to navigate that process from the simple to the elegantly simple, through the complexity. And this is where I struggle with, and because I look at the world now through a series of inputs and outputs, this is where I struggle with, like, and I mean, I'm sure Curio, and I played with Curio a little bit, and not to pan it at all, but it's a great tool. But the problem is, at some point you hit the wall and you can't get the stuff out,
So
right?
my
You know,
comment on the thread was completely appropriate to you,
it
wasn't it?
was, it was absolutely appropriate. See, that drives me crazy when I hit that wall, and now I have to go do what?
Yeah,
Redo the work?
exactly. That was
And I don't want to redo the work. This is like,
exactly. And you can't do it. It looks pretty, and now you can't
yeah,
do it with it. So what? And you have to literally
what's
like
the point?
drive back, or start your journey all over again, and
Right.
then new learnings. And but
And
it
again, there's a certain level of value and again, there's a certain level of value in going over the path again and redoing the work. But I'd like to do that in a tool like Tinderbox so that I never really have to hit those walls. I think that's part of the reason why I like Tinderbox so much, is it has very few hard walls.
correct. I completely agree. And actually, very interestingly, if we open it up from the lens from that perspective, you think about something like, and I don't know enough about Emacs, but pretty much any large scale, like say VS Studio or any any of these apps that allow you to work with multiple text files and link between them and link with external assets, um, is is just so very practical because you can take on a whole range of projects. And if it doesn't get purposed the way you intended, at least those bits are modular and
Yeah,
interchangeable and
and you can reuse them and repurpose them, and that, and again, and for me, and again, I think that's the conundrum with many of the members in the community, is they're like, well, why are you putting in that amount of effort? And for me, I put in the effort because of the ability to reuse. It's worth my time to invest.
yeah, but that's the thing. So, you're doing this. Interestingly enough, you're doing the scaffolding sort of alongside with the project development, as it
Yes.
were. You're building the operating system, if I can go stretch the analogy far enough, as as you're building the projects with which you're using the operating system to create. A lot of people don't are not accustomed to that.
Yeah.
They're accustomed to opening, say, QuickBooks and working within very rigid constraints, just in track, in channel, because you can't go wrong. You can't deviate intentionally or unintentionally. The mistakes sort of end up somewhere. You've got to call tech support and you get the mistake sort of corralled and reined in. But with Tinderbox is very different. So one has actually, I personally believe, has to have the inclination and the mindset that, yeah, whatever I'm learning is not useful right now, but it's going to be useful.
But it will be useful eventually. Yeah, so here's that image. Let me share that image with you. I found.
I couldn't find behavioral.org, by the
Okay,
way.
here it is.
Oh, okay.
Right. So this is that image, which I just love, right? Is
Got
that
it.
it's elegant simplicity. We need to go through complexity.
Yeah, yeah, it's true enough.
And I think so often we'll get into this complexity and we'll get frustrated and fall back to simple.
Well, and so case in point, right? I was working on something a couple of days back. I have an existing macro project, like a mega project file in Tinderbox that I've been tending since the last 5, 6 years. And then I had to do like a quick study of something else. And I knew in the back of my mind that ultimately, if that study worked out, I would be able to fold its necessary elements into the mega Tinderbox file. And sure enough, I did that. I was able to create this little sandbox and build my concepts and ideas and take text and manipulate it the way I want and pull stuff in and out and use prototypes. And at the end of it, I had this neat little, set of a bunch of notes, couple of prototypes, couple of edicts, ready to just pick up and paste into my
Something
mega.
else. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And now that project that's gone. The mini project's gone. I don't need it anymore.
Right.
All its content's been subsumed.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, so that whole idea, I do that a lot too. I will start a ton of like little side mini Tinderbox files for that purpose of getting the mechanics right or thinking through the mechanics. So I don't end up screwing up some of my larger stuff anyway. But that,
Yeah, I
that
came to it the hard way.
yeah, that's a really interesting exercise. But again, it's and as you were talking too, the thing that I find really useful with this as well, like when you spend time, say, learning QuickBooks or Word or numbers,
Hmm.
again, those tools are telling you how to do it, and you do it this way.
Hmm.
Um, and so you're investing a lot of time in those tools to learn it their way, and often that methodology, those mechanics aren't necessarily directly transferable to other tools and mechanics.
Yeah, especially for using the app as it's intended for.
Right. Whereas with Tinderbox, when I'm learning Tinderbox, I'm learning the language of the internet.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
I'm
The
learning
accessible
CSS,
tool.
I'm learning JavaScript, I'm learning visualization tools, I'm learning R, I'm learning, I want to learn Python, right? So the time spent learning this stuff, I'm actually learning computing fundamentals that are universally transferable.
No, completely right. And that's sort of what I was trying to, and I didn't explain it as well as you did, bring up with the idea of, using say Emacs or these
Yeah.
large IDE type environments is because they're so flexible that essentially they encourage the extensibility. They encourage you to go and learn R or learn Python in order to or Plotly or whatever to pull that stuff in. And there's room for it in your
Yeah,
project.
and then also too, you learn that a lot of this stuff is free, right?
Indeed.
Yeah, and so I remember back from there
Good.
in 1993 or 83, there was a talk from Stuart Brandt and Wozniak.
Hmm.
Stuart Brand and Wozniak, and they were having an argument at the first hackers conference
You
about
referred to this. Sorry.
what?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, about the hackers conference, referring to Wozniak was saying information wants to be free, and Brand is saying information wants to be expensive. And the way, obviously I wasn't there at the conversation, but the way I interpret that is exactly what we're talking about. Like in a Tinderbox environment, information's free. When information gets locked into a tool like Word or Numbers or Excel or QuickBooks, it inherently starts becoming expensive. And in many ways, the context is you need to keep subscribing to that software. You need to learn its method to be able to manipulate that, that workflow and that process. And so essentially you get locked in. And for me, that's what it means for me is to become expensive, and that these kind of locked in scenarios or situations I find very expensive.
Yeah,
Um,
that's inexorable though, because when I started out in the media field, there were companies like Digitools, which became DigiDesign, which was bought by Avid. There's Adobe that went out there with Photoshop and the Adobe the typeface and few things like that, and then they turned it into the situation where they were buying Aldus and buying all these other programs. Or you think about Corel, or you think about Intuit, who or Symantec, who just kind of absorbed a whole bunch of applications and then changed the rules and then sort of locked you in. And now you're subscribing and you're not
yeah,
getting.
and now you're stuck. And then
Yeah.
also too in that context, like even the client meeting I was having today too, they're like, well, what we really need to do, and this is a perfect example of so what we're trying to do is map company entity company entity types to product capabilities to customer pain points to use cases, and there isn't a direct one-to-one correlation necessarily. Like pain points can be addressed by multiple use cases, can be addressed by multiple company capabilities. For example, multiple company capabilities can feed into multiple elements of the company's product. And so you need this kind of like mind mapping linking environment. Um, and this is a great example of where I struggle with like reuse, because one of the team members is like, well, I use PowerPoint to do that. So he's going to sit there and open up a giant PowerPoint file and then manually paste in these words and then manually make these links. And then as soon as he's done, like, what do you do with it? Right? Because I can't easily edit that. I can't easily refine it. And there's no way in hell I could ever generate a report from it.
Yeah,
Like,
no,
this is what we mean by these numbers. This is what we mean by this link. You
completely
know,
right. Yep.
and so I'm looking at them. I'm like, and that's why I said at the end of the day, like, guys, I use Tinderbox to do my mind mapping, my linking, all of this, generate the linear report that we're ultimately going to need. Right. So it would be much easier for all of us if you actually adopted my processes and tools. But but you be you, right? If you want to go do it, go take the stuff, manually set it up, and you be you. And again, I think it's that interesting conundrum slash dialogue slash challenge that I find myself constantly butting into, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is sort of like Tinderbox viewed as an engine,
Yeah.
you know, an engine to all these various inputs and all these various
Outputs.
side tools, and but it's in the center, it's in the hub, and it's clicking away. Now, in order to use it as an engine, you need to know a little bit about the engine, and I think this is the key. We think about the whole issue with Curio as well because it's so pretty,
Yes.
Someone might.
Don't get me wrong, it's gorgeous. I
Oh, yeah,
agree.
exactly. And stuff moves on its own, and it's just it yes, it aids your visual thinking, but then once you're done, you're stuck. You
Yeah.
got to open up and then look at all those elements, recreate them in a Nintendo box, and then start going, oh, here's my attribute pairs. This is the dig I want. This is the auto fetch feature I want.
Yeah.
So, like anyway, trying to sort of encapsulate our conversation, perhaps we could see it from this perspective that like uh, here's one way of looking at applications where it's on track and you're told what to do and it pulls the data by itself. And here's the other extreme. It's something like Tinderbox that you can go out and get whatever data you want. You can construct your environment in whatever way you would like. And how would you go about doing it?
Yeah. And on that for me too is like what I've learned along the way is work is it's all work and it's all friction, and that work and that friction, when we go through that, simplistic to elegant simplicity image we just saw, right? Going through that squiggly line graph of complexity, it's all work. But the issue is, where do you want the work to be done? So for example, I'd much rather not necessarily have it pretty until the very end. And at which point I can hand it to a designer and I'm like, go off and make it pretty for me. I'd much rather have my friction be with learning the tools and methods that I need to be able to transform, transclude, manipulate, and mess with the information, as opposed to the sneaker netting, copying and pasting between applications,
Yeah, I
or
hear you.
the constantly reconfiguring Microsoft Word heading styles and all of that. I'll just deal with all that later because that's not the value add for me.
I hear you. That's absolutely correct for me too.
Right. And so then with that in mind, I'd rather invest my time in building a template than copying and pasting from one application to another.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Well, I will sort of interject here that sometimes something comes along that helps you because, like, if you think about, say, Obsidian, it's a very interesting app. It sort of came out of the blue for me as being an environment in which I could sort of maintain and manage my notes in. But it's actually incredibly effective, and you can get a fair level of visual smoothness. You have to take the dog out?
Yeah. Yeah, he's gonna go take the dog for a walk. Yeah.
Yeah. Where was I? Uh,
Yeah, the visual effectiveness is where you're going.
yeah, but what was I trying to say about it? Um, Sorry, I was
No, no,
thinking about
no, it's all
when
good.
dog
I
sitting
got
too.
distracted by the dog too.
Oh no,
Uh,
I'm dog sitting with my son, and he's like old and not doing so well, and so it just like gets my head somewhere else. But yeah. Anyway, it's not probably that important of a point. But yeah, I think ultimately I love the fact that, oh yeah, Obsidian, that's what I was talking about. It allows some measure of visual, the canvas feature and things
yeah.
like that. You can sort of sketch up, but You know, every moment that I spend doing anything more than just basic note taking is a moment that I'm painfully aware that, oh, I should be transporting this little bundle into Tinderbox, which is its natural home, you know.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm of the same ilk. So why don't we jump in and do a like an exercise?
I would love that.
While
Yeah.
we're and why don't we reproduce my time tracking
Oh, yeah,
strategy?
yeah, yeah. That's perfect.
Okay. Um, and so we got about 30 minutes left. So that's
Hmm.
a good exercise to do.
Oh, this hour has gone by pretty fast, faster than most hours go by.
Well, that's what you get when you get to hang out with when we get to hang out with friends, right?
Right, right.
All right. So here is a Tinderbox file.
Mhm.
And I'll kind of do a Julia Child cooking show too, because I don't necessarily want to disclose my time tracking. So the idea is I wanted to keep track of my projects, my clients, my time, things like that. So as we've talked about often, I've and again as I've talked about, let me kind of set the stage too. For me, and when I'm working in a Tinderbox file, there's essentially four kinds of notes, and I'll use separators to help us understand that. The first here, let's go like just say resource notes. Resources folder. All right. So I have a resources folder with all of my notes. And let's go and work an outline too while we're doing that. So I have a resources folder for all of my notes, and that's for me what I often will refer to as my Zettles, my atomic notes, my permanent notes, the notes that get refined down to a single concept that are then can be repurposed in other files. And I have a variety of strategies around how to go about that repurposing in a variety of different ways. So I tend to put my resource notes down here. And then I have got another kind of notes, so I'll call them my scratch notes. And I actually don't do scratch notes in Tinderbox. I do scratch notes in Obsidian or on paper or wherever the method may be. Scratch notes.
You also have the benefit of watch foldering those notes
I
into.
do. I do. I use watch folders all the time and all that. But just for conceptually though, there's this concept called scratch notes. And then we'll add another separator in here. And then I have notes that I call my writings. Okay. And then, so just general unstructured ideas, my structured writing, my atomic notes, and then I'll just copy and paste this. The final kind of area is what I'll call, and I call this, and I don't put a folder for it. This is the backstage.
I wish like well, I really just if I had a wish, I wish all the backstage stuff could be in a one folder called backstage,
I agree, but we can't.
including prototypes, you know.
Yeah, I agree. It would be nice, but unfortunately, that's not the way it is right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And
Right.
it's cool because, you know, like for example, it's a lot of it is to do with individual discipline. I've been able to put all my agents into one folder now. That's what I've been doing for the last year. So
Yeah.
all my agents are in one place.
All right, and actually, while we're at it, if we have time too, I'll show you this agent trick. I think I've shown it to you before, but it'd be fun to show you again.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
but so these are my four kinds of notes, and we'll just go ahead and throw the hints directory in there eventually because we'll need it, right? And
yeah.
so this is where my backstage stuff goes. So typically, this is how I'll immediately kind of organize my files and notes. And so if I'm up in my writings or typically I'll put this one down here, time tracker, right? So here I've got my time tracker notes because this is where I want to keep track of my timing. In some of my work projects, I'll actually put it up here at the top because I want to keep it at the top of the page to make it really easy for me to get there, and I don't have to scroll up and down for things. And so let's focus now for the next 20 minutes or so on constructing this time tracker and how I go about doing it. So if we think about the prototypes that we need for it, we need a prototype called P time tracker.
Yep.
Right? And let's think about the attributes that one might want to have in that time tracker. You might
Sure.
have an attribute called type. And
Yep.
how we deal with that: a start date, an end date, a duration, hours, checked, it's done or not. And then for me, I'll try to keep this as simple as possible, but client, project, activity, in person, right? So that's about as far as I might go. Now, for some of mine, I have some other functional notes. Oh yeah, so we'll add some of my functional notes. Like, is this paid? So if when I add booleans, I always my syntax is something, and it's always is the positive. Is paid means true or false, and it's
Yeah, yeah.
defaulted as false.
I
Um,
think I saw Mark Anderson using it. So good.
yeah. So is paid, is equity,
Yeah, yeah. It's sweat.
retainer, right? So is it a sweat equity project, is development,
Yep.
um, is community,
Yeah.
and
Sometimes something for the government. You got to type on community. Um, like for your taxes, it's I don't know who that is for, but yeah.
right. But I'll get to that in a minute, honestly. So for me, as I was thinking through it, these are the buckets that are the most critical to me. Am I getting paid? How am I getting paid? Either with money or equity. Is this development work I'm doing? Is it community work that I'm doing, or is it personal? Now, in your context of taxes, for me, I would say it's a personal bucket, and in that context, the client would be the government,
All
right?
right. Yeah,
Right,
okay.
and the project would be my 2025 taxes.
Okay. Now, can I ask you questions as you're doing it, or should I wait until you
Yeah,
finish
you
like?
can, you can.
Okay. So why would you use Booleans for the payment factor? Why won't you just use a set
Uh,
and
uh,
with four values?
Good question. I could, but in this context, it goes down to that point of granularity. If I use a set, I have a higher chance of spelling something wrong. I will have a tendency of populating that with a bunch of more crap than I need. And for the purposes of my time tracking, what my ultimate objective is, am I getting paid for this work or not?
I mean,
Right.
sometimes I
And then
do.
if I can search on that Boolean, it's either a true or false. I either am or I'm not.
Okay, I mean, I do something which is I basically put a little rating system of 1 to 5, which also could do pretty much the same thing because you can search for something that's 3 or lower
You
on the
could.
paid versus
Good.
work scale.
Yeah, you could. Now let me show you some of the tricks that I did for that. But that's a really good question. So let's go ahead now, and I'm going to go ahead and create these. So it's a type is a set, duration is an interval, hours is a number, client is a set, project is a set, activities are a set, people are sets, and these are booleans. Okay, so let's say we've got that. All
Yeah.
right. So we've got our time tracker, and let's have fun with it. So we want to go ahead and type time, and maybe or clock. Yeah. So we've got our little stopwatch thingy happening there too. Now, here's the question. Now, to make it a little bit easier to manipulate, I also just for visuals, I'll say like P folder, and the folder has a little folder icon. And then on the folder icon, I like to do on ads. I'm adding in the on ad up here, and I'll just copy and paste from my, I'll get back to that in a minute. So this is going to be where my time tracking stuff is going to happen. That's my time tracking folder. Now, in order, now I could, and I could say, on, $ prototype equals P time tracker.
Type on prototype.
Yeah, I'll fix that. Okay. And so when if I hit shift, option shift enter, it creates a child note on this note. And you can see I instantly get the time tracker thing. I can give it a name, and then I can just say, and so what I've started to do for myself is the moment I start a project, I just go in here, hit start like this, and my clock starts for me. And then we'll work. When I switch initiatives, I just go in here and hit end, and it ends for me. And let's say I did this for like 10 minutes from now, right? But actually, let's do it for now. Let's just leave that, and this is actually going to be tracker develop time tracker app, right? So we'll see how long it takes us, and we'll be ending in less than 26 minutes. So I'm starting that exercise right now.
Great.
Now, one of the things that I was struggling with was, what is the quickest way to populate some of these attributes? And I was really struggling with it because I want to find this kind of nice middle ground of automagical stuff. And I was thinking about, and so I've got I've got certain paid clients, I've gotten certain types of work that I do. And what I landed down on, which I thought was kind of interesting, was this. So I'm going to add a separator in.
Okay.
And I'm going to call this this separator teaching. Right. So I was thinking about what are some of my bigger buckets of stuff that I do, and I'm going to take this prototype off because I don't want separators to have that prototype. I'm going to add that separator in again, and I'll go, all right. So I started thinking, well, what are my efforts? There's teaching, there is TBX community work. Oops, sorry, separators. TBX community work. Let's say I've got another one called, I did it again. Let's see, I've got another one called, this is a paid client. We'll call them Acme Inc. Right? So, and then there would be another bucket called personal.
Yep.
Oops, I did it again. Shit. Okay, and then under teaching, just to make it easy, let's do this. I'll show you this. So if I go here, copy this one, and under teaching, I'll go here, and I'll say teach class, and then course development. So in some context, what you see I kind of doing is, what are the broad granular chunks of stuff that's happening?
And you're nesting them too, which is quite fascinating. I've never thought about nesting separators, but yeah.
Yeah, so I'm nesting the separator, and then that also lets me collapse them as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, now watch what happens, which is really cool. So if I go up here, and I'm gonna go to my own Tinderbox file and copy it over. I created a, where is it? P. And I want to time and tracker, actually. I use camel case, so tracker actually is its own standard word, so capital time and then tracker. So
Yep.
I created a different prototype. Actually, I'll do it this way. I'll just copy it over. I created a different prototype called P separator.
Okay.
Okay. And it looks like I spelled equity royalty wrong when I was doing this. Oh, equity retainer is what I called it. All right. So let me fix that. And this is where I've got inconsistency in files, but this is a beautiful thing. I just go in here. Actually should be royalty. I'll have to fix it in my other file. Because a retainer would be paid.
Right.
Yeah, that was a typo in my file. Okay, so I'll fix that right here. So I don't want equity royalty, I want equity retainer. Yeah.
You use bar equal to all the time nowadays?
What?
You use the bar equal to
Yeah,
for
all the time because I find that I move notes amongst different containers and I don't want stuff to get overwritten.
yeah,
All right.
same. Yeah.
So now watch what happens here though, which is really interesting. And I'll let me just walk through this action code and I'll do it here. And oh, by the way, I also do this to make it easier for my on ads. I go on ad.
Boom. Yep.
No, just a minute. Here, where is it? No, not on ad. Yeah. All right. And then I make it 3 lines so I can have more to edit. And then for the sake that I might want to, I don't have any quotes in this one. So look what I did. So I said, what I want you to do when I'm owning add to a separator, make the prototype equal the P time tracker. And then I need to end. So make the client equal to the client parent, make the project equal to the project parent, make the start date equal now. If the name is untitled, title it time tracker, make the type equal the time tracker. Because that way, if I ever change the prototype of a note, I know that the type of this note is because the other thing I've learned too is in some contexts I change prototypes of the notes for functional purposes, not for the type of note that it is. So a lot of
But you
people,
retain the type.
a lot of people use prototypes for like designating the type of note. I
Yeah,
use
yeah.
prototypes primarily for function. And so I use an on add to overwrite the inheritance of a note and force it to be it's a time tracker note, and that becomes the type. And then I populate, and then I have my different is development equals is development parent is paid equals is paid. We said royalty. Here is equity royalty. Yep, is parent community, etc. So now that I've got that program, I can just go up here and if I double click on this, that gets everything away. And so then I can go up here and I'm going to assign to all of these notes the prototype separator. So now every separator has gotten these values. So I could call this the client here. And so everyone knows I teach for Cal Poly. So I'll go Cal Poly teaching. And so the client is Cal Poly Pomona. And currently I'm teaching the fall 24 mobile marketing course. And this is a paid gig. If I go down here, this is personal. The client is Michael Becker. And the project may be whatever I end up doing. If it's Acme client, it's Acme Inc. It's contract, fall 24 contract, and it's paid. Up here, this one will be the Cal Poly, but it's now the project here is course development. And this is not paid, it's development. Right?
Yeah.
And this is Tinderbox community. And it is, and then you can do here, I can do this like go copy paste. Okay, weekly meetup. And then this one, and then because I've got, yeah.
You have to fix the name there too, Michael. It's the TY on the community on the node name, yeah. And the child.
All right. Right. And then weekly meetup, and then I might have because we all know I'm doing this as well. Tinderbox, PBX 101 course.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's the community. It's and the client, and then this is like Tinderbox students. The client, like fall or December 24 cohort, right? So you can see that it's really easy to kind of populate that, and that's paid. right? So I
Yeah.
made that, and then I've added some like archiving stuff there too. But you'll generally see what I've got here. So now if
Yeah.
we go to Cal Poly and I'm teaching the class, if I hit Option Shift Return on the cohort, it automatically adds my prefix to the note, and I'll say like December 12, 13 teaching class. And you'll notice that it automatically, and I've got a problem here I got to fix in just a minute. Let's see what's wrong with that. Teaching class, it automatically started the time for me. That's the now. Clearly I did something. Oh, and then here's what I didn't fix. So on this one, if you look down here, is paid parent.
Technically, Roger.
Oh, I know why it didn't work. Because this one is actually, when I'm teaching the class, I'm actually paid.
Hmm.
So if I fix that again and I go like this, you'll now see this flag is actually Boolean set teaching paid.
Hmm. So that you didn't have override in the sense that if you enter a task, if you move it around, you can move it from community to paid,
So if I
etc.
accidentally move it down to here, it doesn't, and the client one, it changed because clearly I don't have the override set on that one properly. So if I go down here, yeah, that override should have worked, but I'll see. Oh, because the here I didn't have the client,
Ah,
right? And I didn't populate my fields, and this is course development. Right, so that's the project. So now if I do it again, you'll see I've got that. December 13 teaching class. And now because I've got the overrides, if I accidentally move it there, it doesn't change, or that is development
yeah,
popped in. And I can just fix it, right? So it's not perfect, but it generally gets me where I need to go.
for sure.
Now, so teaching. Let's say I finished this at 6 o'clock. So here's where the action code comes into play. And this is a trick that I've done for myself, because I've got such large files. I've recently started this strategy, and I'll go ahead and show you here in stamps, and I'll pull my stamp out. Okay. I've recently, yeah, and I've got something else I need to add into this sample file as well. So I'm going to paste in my on visit stamp for time tracker. And I'm also going to paste in my generate shortcode function. All right. So I have a function that when there is a hyphen in front of a name like this, it generates a short title for me. And so and just so we can demonstrate how that works, I'll go to this prototype. I like to have my prototypes up here. There's the time tracker. And just so people can see it, I'm going to add the short title. And I'll go ahead and add name here as well. Right. So, and we'll create the short title prototype. So if you look at here, I've got the name is TR December, blah, blah, blah. If we look at the time tracker prototype, what is this action code doing? It's if the prototype is false, I want you to set the end date. And if the end date is never, excuse me, if the end date is not never,
Yeah.
I want you to set the duration to the interval of start date, end date. And I
Okay.
want you to set the hours to duration.hour plus the duration.minute divided by 60. So that will give me a number of minutes that I did that exercise for. I then
Yep.
want you to set the hours to the precision of 2.
Yep.
And then I want you to make the color green. Else, reset everything.
Nice.
And I've got an archive thing. I've got an archive element here too. And you'll notice that in the file, there's an is archive feature I've got.
Hmm.
I will, because I don't need to see it. I didn't notice I needed to create it. So let's go ahead and create that really quick. So we'll say is archive Boolean. Whoops. Go back to this. And so you now see archive is now done. And then I have a string, action code that says, oh, and then I've got another attribute that I use. I don't like doing my attribute calculations in the displayed attributes function. So I don't like doing action code here in the displayed attributes area. So I have a value, a string variable I call displayed attribute, displayed expression cache that I
Okay.
populated. So what ends up happening is displayed, and let's go ahead and do it. So now it's value. You'll see, and then I got is no show title, which is a whole other attribute that I can demonstrate in just a minute.
You've done that. You've done that before. Yeah, the no-show
Right.
title.
Yeah.
Great.
But I'll just create it so it's here.
Yeah.
Boolean. Okay. So now we've got all the functioning elements here. So if is no show title is true, then I want you to show the displayed expression with the name plus the hours and then no show title signal. If it's false, I want you to show the display expression with just the hours. So this is my on visit code. So what I then do is I copy this, I go to the prototype, and I use quick stamp because there's no if you look here, there's no tab for getting to the on visit. So
Okay,
I
yeah.
stamp, and then I say stamp that code. So what that's saying is when you visit this note, stamp this note with that action code,
Got it.
right? So now watch what happens. If I go now and click on this note, all of that automatically just got populated,
Brilliant. Yeah, yeah.
right? You'll see that I got a short title generated that I'll use for my outputs and my reports, because in my reports I won't necessarily want the prefix. Time got calculated, hours got calculated to 0.75 hours of an hour.
Yep.
You know, and then I can go and run reports. And so then if I do that something similar here, I can go and say, marketing plan. And let's say that was earlier today at like 3 o'clock. And I
Mhm.
that around 4, click away, come back. It's now 1 hour, all automatically calculated.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now,
Good.
here's the really fun thing that a couple other fun things I did. So, and I'm going to go ahead and we'll move this one into the Tinderbox community work because that's what we're doing right now. And you'll see it got Tinderbox community and it's not weekly meetup. We'll just go, yeah, it is weekly meetup, honestly. Okay. So we're working on this. Now in Time Tracker, there's something I realized I had to do. I created another folder called Daily Tracking
Sure.
and Archive. Right. And so these are both folders. And I'm going to move Tracking Archive. And I'm going to tab that in, and I'm going to tab that one in, and I'm going to tab that back out. And then I'm going to take all of these. Actually, I'm going to move, move these up here. There they go. And I'm going to, oops, come on. Take all these and move these into the daily tracker, right? So that way I've got my,
The structure is the daily tracking and then the archive, basically.
right. So I've got my daily tracker and my archive. Now, a couple other things while we're trying to just kind of finishing up on this. What I did here on my, where's my phone? Okay. So to help me kind of get a sense of, what's happening with, with these particular notes, this is where I did put some action code in. Did I do it as a rule? Yeah, as a rule. So I'll copy this over as a rule into this note. So on my daily tracking, I want to be able to quickly get a sense, like what percentage of time am I allocating to different projects. And let's summarize this up real here. And where does my personal one go? Here it is. Whoops. Right, and let's just add a personal one. Lunch. Right, and clearly this one's a little off because I've got is paid. Is paid as parent. Oh yeah, that's right. That's fine. I just got the parent of personal as is paid. And so there we go. So I had lunch. And let's say that was from 12 to 1. You know, and this is where this is a great example of the necessity, the potential of granularity. I could create a subfolder under here if I did this a lot and said the activity was lunch,
Yeah.
right? If I wanted to, and the project was health, right? And so I'm finding I'm not populating the activity in person or that much, but
Mhm.
I've got it there eventually if I ever want to go back to it.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, here's what's kind of fun with the with what I've done with this edict, and I'll just copy and paste it so that it save us time. So I've got a rule, and I say the variable is person hour. If the person hours is sum the descendants, if the prototype is time tracker and is personal is true and it's down in alias, and grabbing the hours. Sum the work hours if the descendants is personal equals false. So in other words, there's personal and everything else is work. All right. I then said, grab the paid hours, calculate percentages, give me the kind of what percentage of hours is a total, what percentage of hours is personal, what percentage of hours of work, and within work, what percentage of hours is development versus paid. Right? And then my archive function, which is really fun, is
Sorry, is this expression cache a string?
yeah, yeah. Let me show you the checked on visit time tracker. Yeah. Okay, and I'm going to come back to that in just a minute. If variable list equals collect list. Yeah, and let me check the on visit time tracker again really quick. Come on. Where'd the breadcrumbs go? And if I go hit the on visit time tracker stamp. Yeah, so if checked, is archive equals true? Time tracker, I just got to make sure that it's the same. I called it the same name. I didn't. See, I said completed time records. So let's just use the same name. All right. So now what happens? So when I do that, and let's paste this code back in here. Oh, and then the one thing I now need to do too is I need to change this display expression to display expression cache because I have to tell Tinderbox that I want you to use the display expression cache or the display expression. And I want to do that for this one too. Okay. So now if you're looking here, it automatically summed up. I've done 2.7 hours of work. 36% of it was personal. 1.7 hours of it was professional. And 100% of it was paid. And so I can just kind of get a glance up and see what's going on with that. Makes sense.
And what happens tomorrow?
So that's why I built my archive button. So when I come up to tomorrow,
Yeah.
I show up here.
Yep.
I add the checked. I'll just copy over these. Right. I have the checked one here. Right. So remember, this edict is running on this note. And if it's checked, it triggers the stamp. Right. So when I do that, I hit checked. And all of those notes get moved to the and I labeled them the different number, a different name. So this should be time tracker like that. And I will redo that real quick just to show you what happens. Come on. There we go. And they all got moved to there.
Excellent. And I mean, you could also do that programmatically in the sense that if the date is not the same.
Yeah, you could, but this was so easy for me. So what I end up doing now is on my file, the farthest tab is always daily time tracker.
Nice.
So I just come in and I go blah 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 blah, and then when I wake up in the next morning, I just click this, and it automatically clears the day for me.
So, but now this is this is the app which is your CRM, correct?
Yeah, it's my CRM, it's my sales pipeline, it's my contact management list, it's where my clients are. I use it for revenue tracking as well.
So it's open all the time. It's one of your perennial.
Open all of the time,
Excellent. It's so great.
almost 24/7.
Yeah. I mean, I know, just case in point that this is a great illustration of using Tinderbox. And during our conversation, we were discussing this is about, the justifiability or the paying attention to time. And you're not only you spending time in Tinderbox, but also you're able to now track the amount of time you spend in Tinderbox
Right.
pretty automatically.
Right. Yeah, and I can actually see, am I spending too much? Because what I'm finding, I have to be legit. I mean, if I didn't have to worry about income, I'd do this 100% because I love it. But I have to go earn a living. Right. And that's partly too why I'm trying to like launch these courses, these Tinderbox classes, right? Because I could end up giving away all of my assets and all of my value and never actually earn a living.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, I'm not in a place where I can be retired. So if I'm sitting there spending 2 or 3 hours with you teaching you something, I should be able to get paid for that.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, the promise is enormous because there's so much one can learn and you have so much to teach. So it looks like a good value proposition. Um, and I'm sure you'll be building it out and up because you'll
Yeah,
have a.
building it out, building it out, building it up, building in the aside. And honestly, too, when I teach my classes, I'm teaching you the fundamentals of Tinderbox, but also depending on the cohort and the people that are in the class, we do what the class is interested in doing. Like, how do I write a book? How do I write an article? How do I write my resume? How do I learn how to code this and that? So
Yeah,
every
yeah.
class will be different based on whoever happens to be in the class and the topics that they're talking about. How do I use Obsidian? How do I use Pandoc? How do I set it up? Those are all the different things that will make every class different and then different from meetups. And then my plan too is by the end of the year, when I'm doing meetups like this, you're kind of getting my code for free. But if you want to pay me for it, you can come to my Tinderbox store and buy the time tracking template, for example. And
Okay,
in
that's
that
a good
time
idea.
tracking template, I'll have like a link to the recording. I might have a README file. I'll curate a little bit more to make it more accessible. Otherwise, you just got to weed through the hundreds of meetups. And which you can certainly do for free, but if your time is worth money, it might be
Yeah,
worth
yeah.
10, $20 to pay me 10 or $20 just to grab that template and go for it.
No, no, again, I mean, this is again a value proposition in the sense that you are saving somebody time and that is worth money. And so it seems fair, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Oh,
That's what I've been playing with the last few weeks and trying to get that organized for myself. But
it's great.
yeah,
This is great. It's such a great, and also it's such a good starter, and anyone can sort of expand and take it to their own place.
right.
So
And they can go in, change the names, they can change the parameters, they can change the type, the naming of things, they can change the booleans. But for me, this was the lowest overhead time tracking utility that I could figure out and how to build in Tinderbox. And
yeah,
then
and you're in Tinderbox, which makes a lot of sense.
and then from that you can build dashboards. And obviously I haven't gone to this far yet, but the next step is then write reports, right?
Opposite.
So then I could turn around and say, hey, Acme Inc., I spent 40 hours with you this month. Our contract time is done. Those are the kinds of project reporting that we could do.
I wonder if you could generate invoices as well through this, but then it starts becoming a nightmare because now you've got to export the invoice to somewhere and then it goes into your accounts receivable and all this stuff.
Well, you could, I mean, because if you're using, yeah, but you'd use QuickBooks for your invoice. And then what you could do is grab the copy link to invoice out of QuickBooks and paste it in your Tinderbox. And then you can then use Tinderbox to email to that customer and say, here's the link for the invoice.
Yeah. And you could, again, it could make some kind of a tracker that even tracks what
Correct.
invoices
Has
you've
it
been.
been paid? Has it not been paid? And all that. So absolutely, you could do that. And again, that's the other thing I've kind of learned. As zealotly as I am with Tinderbox, there are specialized applications like QuickBooks for accounting and invoicing, because my tax accountant needs that.
Absolutely right.
Right. There is Zotero for citations. There's DevonThink for document repository. So specialized tools are for specialized purposes. Tinderbox is that, for me, is that really nice non-edged bound middle ground where everything can kind of meet.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and there's so much you can do. Plus, with action coding, it just puts it over the top.
Yeah.
Essential.
All right. Well, our first APAC session, we've hit our hour and a half. I could continue to go on forever, but thank you very much for recommending this session, and we'll publish this video, and
Yeah,
hopefully those in APAC realize that we'll be doing this first Friday of every month, and hopefully we'll get some of our Asian APAC living community members to participate and bring their stories and puzzlements and be more actively part of the community.
let's hope. And next month I'll be back in India for a month. So
Oh yeah, so
there,
you'll be there. Yeah, so that
on the scene. Yeah,
yeah,
exactly.
yeah, actually you'll actually be able to be there in the morning now as opposed to midnight, which is great.
Exactly.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks
All right.
so much for a
Thanks,
great
man. Thanks,
meetup.
Art. See you, man.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.